Hello, good morning everyone. Welcome to home-based learning. Okay, now so today we're going to talk about heredity. We're going to go through the self-check answers and practice task answers. Okay, now so please get your workbook and lesson notes ready. Okay, we're going to start soon. Now, so for today, learning objective, basically we're going to finish up the review self-check questions in Heredity Part 1. Heredity Part 2 self-check questions, and then we're also going to discuss some of the practice tasks and self-check questions in Heredity Part 3. Okay, at the end, I will end with some remarks for the survey form for 10 external human traits. Alright, now let us get started for Heredity Part 1. Okay, please turn to self-check question page 8. Okay, we're going to do question from page 8 to 11. Now, first question, what is needed for sexual reproduction to happen? Okay, now so some important points to note is that two parental cells, that is the sperm cells and egg cells, are needed. And then also fusion of gametes involve specialized sex cells coming together. And then also require lots of energy, especially nutrients, oxygen, glucose, etc. Okay, now so these are some important points for question. Now next question 2. Which of the following give the best explanation for why sexual reproduction does not produce offspring identical to one of the parents? Alright, now so these three are the options. So if you read through all the options, the best explanation will be from C. Okay, C, they inherit characteristics from both parents and so therefore are a mixture of both. Okay, now question 3, fill in the blanks. Gametes are only required for sexual reproduction, whereas asexual reproduction will use part of the organism to form a new organism, therefore creating identical offspring. Okay, question 4. Tick the true statements. Okay, now so out of the 4 statements, okay, the first, sexual reproduction allows for variation. So this is true. And generations to adapt to changing environment over time. Alright, now the other two statements, faster reproduction than asexual reproduction, this is incorrect. Animals breeders to know exactly what characteristics the offspring will have, this is also not true. Now question 5. List some organisms that are better suited to asexual reproduction. Explain your answers. Okay, now so some example you can give could be bacterial, yeast, hydra, okay, that we have touched on during lesson. Okay, now many single cell organisms rely on binary fusion to produce themselves. So bacteria and yeast reproduce by binary fusion. Okay, now why is it so? The reason is because in order to colonize an environment quickly, especially when environmental conditions are favorable, for example, there are many or lots of food available, or it could be on the other way, less favorable. Okay, when the environment is harsh, okay, the animals or the organism would want to preserve their species and therefore reproduce quickly. So all these organisms, there is a special term known as opportunist, okay, opportunist organism, okay, as shown here. Now next, question 6, identify if the following advantageous trait belong to asexual or sexual reproduction. Okay, now so you have to look through all the 8 traits, okay, and then decide whether do they belong to the asexual or sexual reproduction. Okay, now so if you look through very carefully and think through, this should be the advantageous traits. Okay, now so if advantageous, trait number 1, 4, 5, 6, and 8. All these are advantageous traits to the asexual reproduction. Okay, the rest will be for sexual reproduction. Next, question 7. Identify if the following disadvantageous traits belong to asexual or sexual reproduction. Similarly, you look through all the 4 statements or 4 traits. Okay, and then if you look at trait number 1, growth of a new plant to maturity from a seed is slow. Okay, now so it's slow, and generally this is for sexual reproduction. So that's why sexual reproduction generally is a slower process. Okay, now let us look at trait number 4. The two parents are usually needed, though not always. Some plants can self-pollinate. Okay, when two parents are needed, that means there will be a higher level of requirement. Okay, now compared to only one parent. So therefore, this is another disadvantageous trait of sexual reproduction. Okay, now next let us take a look at extension. Now, so these are optional questions. So question 8. Using full sentences explain why brothers do not usually look exactly alike. Okay, now so if you already have watched through the videos, okay, now from the QR code, okay, you should roughly know that brothers and sisters don't look exactly alike. Okay, because everyone actually has 2 copies of most of their genes, okay, which is known as alleles. All right, now so if you have already completed up to lecture 2 and 3, you already know the terms alleles, and these copies can be different. Now, so the parents pass one of these 2 copies of their genes to their kids. Okay, now so that's why, and we know that this genetic information will be passing through randomly. Okay, now so this is one of the big reason why you don't look exactly like your brother or sisters. Okay, now next, to further extend the question, suggesting why some characteristics, okay, for example, the hair color, the eye color, may be similar to a sibling. Okay, now, so why 2 of these traits are similar to a siblings? Okay, now, one example could be the example of the dimples. Okay, so if dimples, you represent it by 2 forms. Okay, the alleles, the capital D and the small d. Okay, these are 2 alleles. And capital D, okay, that mean give you dimples, and small d, that mean no dimples. Okay, so take note of these 2 representation. Now, like almost all genes, you have 2 copies of the genes that give you dimples. Now, so the 2D copies, you have dimples. Okay, and 2 small d copies clearly means that there is no dimples. Okay, now, but what about a capital D and a small d? If you have dimples, okay, then you will have dimples because this is a heterozygous state. All right, now, so in heterozygous state, because D is dominant, and therefore all the heterozygous form will have dimples, whereas the homozygous small d, okay, which means recessive, will not have dimple. Okay, now let us take a further look at what happened for some characteristic that seems to be passed down or linked up together. Okay, now let's say that the gene for dimple is next to the genes for wet earwax. Okay, the wet earwax come in 2 versions, the capital W and the small w. Okay, now so imagine your dad has capital D and capital W on 1 chromosome. Okay, and a small d, small w on another chromosome. Okay, so if you have dimple, then most likely you will have wet earwax too. Okay, and if you don't have dimple, you will have dry earwax. Okay, so at least, okay, in this example, all right. Now, so in other words, if you have a capital D, you are almost certain to get a capital W. Okay, now so, and if you get a small d, you are most certain to get a small w. Okay, now so that means in ideally, this is what we call the totally linked genes. Okay, that means these two genes are joined, almost like joined together, and will be passed on to the next generation together. Okay, now so that's why certain traits like your hair color, eye color, okay, may be similar to that of your sibling. Okay. Now next, let us move on to heredity part 2 self-check questions. Okay, now so please turn to heredity part 2 self-check question. We're going to look at question from page 7 to 8. Okay, now question 1. Now in a cross experiment using tall and dwarf plants, it was found that the alleles for tall plants was dominant capital T, and that for dwarf was recessive small t. Now 450 plants which are heterozygous were crossed. After they flowered, 1,000 seeds were collected and sown. What is the likely number of dwarf plants in the F1 filial generation? Okay, now so the question is actually asking for F1 filial generation. Now, so if you work it out very quickly, your answer should be 250. Okay, now why is it 250? If you look at the working from the Punnett square, okay, now so because you want a dwarf plant now, which is shown here. Okay, now so dwarf plant, out of all the 4 offspring, there is only 1/4 of a chance that you will get a dwarf plant. So therefore 1/4 times 1,000 will give you 250. Okay, now so therefore that is how you get your answer. Okay, now question 2. The diagram below shows the inheritance of albinism in a family. The alleles for albinism is recessive. Okay, this is important. You know that this trait is recessive. It will be shown only in recessive form. Okay, now so from this genetic diagram given, what could be the genotype? Okay, the question 1, genotype of both parents. Okay, now so in order to have this albinism, which is recessive, so that means if you represent them, they should be small letters. For example, if let's say the normal son, I put capital N, and then albinism should be small n, small n. Okay, now so in this case, they need to have heterozygous parents in order to have this, okay, albinism or albino daughter. So therefore, the parents need to be heterozygous. That means NN and NN. Okay, because as you can see from the offspring, the 2 of them are normal. Okay, and then there is only one albino daughter. Okay, now so therefore the parents need to be heterozygous. Question 3. In cats, the alleles capital S for short fur is dominant. So this is important information. The question says capital S is dominant, short fur is dominant to long fur, which is represented by small s. Okay, now so this is for long fur. So what is the genotype of a true breeding long fur cat? So they want a long fur cat. So if they also want a genotype, So therefore, you can tell that it need to be only of this answer because this is a homozygous, okay, recessive for long fur. So in order to show the long fur, they need to be of this genotype. Question 4. In plants, the alleles for round seed, which is capital R, is dominant to alleles for wrinkled seed, which is a small r. Now, which alleles would likely be represented in male nucleus of pollen grain? So important. So you must know in where it is the male nucleus of pollen grain, okay, produced by the wrinkled seed plant. Okay, now so there is only one option in the gametes. In the gametes, okay, there is only one alleles. So therefore, it can only be R. Okay, they cannot carry double dosage. Okay, and yeah, and because the question asks that it is in the wrinkled seed. So therefore, it need to be small r and not a capital R. Okay, question 5. A. In cross 1, mice with long tail were bred with mice with short tail. So long tail going to bred with short tail. All of the offspring had long tail. Okay, now so you use these symbols given, capital T and small t, to represent the two alleles controlling the length of the tail. Draw the full genetic diagram. Okay, now so this question requires full genetic diagram to show the inheritance of the tail in this cross. So therefore, you should have this. Okay, now so let us take a look. So the parental phenotype is long tail and short tail. Parental genotype is the capital TT and then a small letter T and T. Okay, now, and these are the gametes, okay, from the long tail parent and the short tail parent. Okay, and then the F1 generation, the genotype is of the is heterozygous form. Now, in fact, if you look through all will be heterozygous, okay, capital T and small t, which means the F1 generation phenotype will be all mice with long tail, okay, because of the capital T, which is dominant. Okay, now so this is how you should present your answers. So this is the genetic diagram. Okay, now part 2. Two offspring from cross 1 were interbred. What is the percentage of offspring from cross 2 that are heterozygous for long tail? Okay, the question 1, heterozygous for long tail, percentage of it. Okay, now so if you take note, the offspring are heterozygous. Now, so if you use a genetic diagram, again, similar methods, parental phenotype, long tail, cross with a long tail. But because this is a heterozygous, so the parental genotype, heterozygous and heterozygous. So these two, you cross them. Okay, now, and these are the gametes from the respective parents, and the F1 generation genotype will be of the various possible combination. Okay, now so you have the F1 generation phenotype of 3 long tail is to 1 short tail. Okay, so the ratio is 3 long tail is to 1 short tail. The percentage of heterozygous. Okay, now if you want heterozygous, so that means only these two are qualified. So therefore, it will be 2 out of 4, and therefore your answer should be 50%. Okay, because F1 genotype is 2 out of 4 is heterozygous. Okay, good. Now we left with Heredity Part 3 self-track questions. Okay, now so please turn to page 2. We're going to go through some of the and let us look at practice task example 1. Okay, now you can check your answers with what you have written in our last Friday home-based learning. Okay, now in breeding experiment, a purebred black guinea pig was crossed, okay, with a purebred white one. Okay, so one black and crossed with the white one. Okay, now so all the F1 offspring were black. Okay, so all these are important information. So they tell you that all F1 offspring were black. So from here, you can actually know that the black very likely is the dominant alleles. Okay, now so you need to explain this information by means of, again, the question require genetic diagram. So you cannot use a Punnett square, so you have to use a genetic diagram. Now, so first of all, the F1 offspring is heterozygous. If it is since it resembles the black parent, so black is dominant. So first of all, you need to define, you let B, okay, let capital B represent the dominant alleles for black. And then the small b, the small letter b is the recessive alleles for white. Okay, so these are the various phenotype and genotype, okay, of the parents. So you can see this is a homozygous dominant black, homozygous, and this is a homozygous recessive white, so small b. Okay, so this is a parental phenotype, okay, for parental phenotype, and these are the parental genotype. Okay, now take note, we generally use test cross, okay, by crossing it with homozygous recessive. Okay, and then the gametes from the both parents is the respective capital B and the small letter b. Okay, these are the only gametes possible. Now the offspring, okay, phenotype is all black. The genotype will be as represented here, one capital B, one small b. Okay, let us continue. Now, if the F1 offspring were allowed to breed among themselves, what proportion of F2 generation would be expected to be heterozygous? Okay, now so the F2 generation. So you also need to show genetic diagram to prove your answer. So again, take note, genetic diagram needed. Okay, now so what you can do is that you going to do a breeding within the F1 generation. So the F1 generation, as you recall, both of them are heterozygous. Okay, so they are heterozygous. So that means represented by capital B and small letter b. Okay, and the various gametes produced are these respective gametes that are produced. Okay, now so if you use the Punnett square quickly, you can realize that these are the combination possible. Okay, now and from the F2 phenotype, you can tell that there are 3 black, which are these 3 is to 1 white. Okay, so 1 white. Okay, but in terms of the genotype, the F2 genotype, you can see that there is one homozygous dominant, okay, capital B and B, and then also 2 of them are heterozygous, and then one is the of homozygous recessive, which are white. Okay, now so because the question asks for heterozygous, so therefore you have 2, okay, 2 out of 4, so therefore it is 50% because 2 out of 4. Okay, now so therefore you convert to percentage, it will be 50%. Okay, let us take a look at the next part. If you were given a black guinea pig, how would you attempt to find out whether it is heterozygous or homozygous? Okay, now so again, just by using the test cross. So a test cross, okay, for the black guinea pig with a homozygous white one. Okay, now so this is the test cross. Okay, now so first of all, similarly, if you show it in genetic diagram, if the parent is of homozygous black, okay, you will have all the offspring showing black. Okay, but on the other hand, if the parent is of heterozygous black, then you will realize that the offspring will be of the ratio of 1 black is to 1 white. Okay, the reason is because from the heterozygous black, the genotype, okay, that means the genotype is a capital B and one small b, and the gametes produced will be one capital B and one small b. And so that's why if you're going to match it with those of the white type, which are both recessive alleles, small b, ultimately you will have 50% of black and 50% of white. Okay, now so this is one of the way for test cross. Okay, now next, let us look at example 2. The diagram below shows the inheritance of hair color in human. Now, so which is the dominant phenotype? Give an explanation for your answers. Now, so if you examine, okay, the diagram given to you, the genetic diagram, okay, now so you can actually count. Okay, so what is the approach? The approach is generally you have to look at the pedigree chart. Okay, and then from the chart, you look at the number of individual. Okay, more. Okay, you will notice that the dominant trait, which is the black hair, the black hair is represented by this. Okay, those with shaded. Okay, so those with the shaded, whether is it round that means it's a female and square is the male. Okay, but if it is a shaded, that means they have black hair. Okay, on the other hand, if let's say the recessive trait, whether it is of this type or this type, okay, without shade, these are red hair. Okay, so you look at it, the if the number, if you look at 11 altogether, but out of 11, 6 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 of them are shaded. So that means 6 of them have the dominant trait, which is black hair. Whereas the other 5, remaining 5 are of the recessive trait. They are less, okay? So less, they are the red hair. Okay, now next, what you can do is the dominant trait. Okay, that means dominant trait, they have more offspring. Okay, will follow the parental trait. Whereas the recessive trait, fewer offspring will appear. Okay, now so if you look at take the pedigree, you will notice that the answer should be the dominant phenotype is black hair. Okay, black hair is dominant because you have 6 out of that 11 given there. Okay, now how you confirm? There is one confirmation, which is by looking at parent number 6 and number 7, which is here and here. Okay, now both of them have black hair, but they have a child, which is number 10. Now this child has red hair. Okay, so this is a very important piece of information. They tell you that, okay, parents 6 and 7 are heterozygous. Okay, they carry the recessive alleles which is not expressed in them. Okay, so that means although they have black hair, but they carry the alleles for red hair. Okay, but they are not expressed. It only expressed in the next generation here through child number 10, who is a homozygous recessive. So the recessive alleles for red hair is only expressed in child 10 who is homozygous recessive. Okay, now so this explains why the answer is black hair is the dominant phenotype. Okay, now what is the chance of a third child, okay, from parent 3 and 4, which is parent 3 and 4, having black hair? Now, in order for them to have black hair, okay, let us examine a few things. Now, since parents 3 and 4 have child 8, okay, so if you look at child 8 with red hair, so this for sure we know that this is a homozygous recessive, okay, so this is a homozygous recessive. Okay, we can conclude that the parent 3 is homozygous recessive. Okay, so this is homozygous recessive, while parent 4 is heterozygous. Okay, now next, okay, now so if you look at the Punnett, if you look at this genetic diagram, you can actually see, okay, now that in order to get the third child, okay, from the parents, okay, having black hair, it is actually half. Okay, so it is actually half, 50%, because out of the chance of third child from parent 3 and 4 have black hair is 50%, because why? 2 out of 4 possibility is having black hair. So therefore it is 50%. Codominance. Alright, codominance occur when both alleles are equally expressed in the heterozygous condition. Codominance in the shorthorn cattle, yeah, this is what we examined last Friday, alright, during the home-based learning. And one very common one is the ABO blood group in human, okay, in which the blood group A and B, AB, which means the IA and IB, they are both codominant. Now next, practice task 3. Two purebred flowering plant of the same species, one with red flower, another with white flower, were crossed. All the F1 generation plant had white flower with red spot. Explain the result of the cross. Now, so let us take a look at the genetic diagram and then to see what's happening. Now, first of all, we look at the parental phenotype and the parental genotype. The phenotype is white, okay, and crossed with the red. And then the genotype is WW and RR, all of capital letter. Okay, now because in this case it is a codominant, so we represent everything in capital letter. Okay, the gametes are of all these various type, and the offspring, the F1 genotype are of WR, capital W and capital R. So which means the F1 phenotype are all white flower with red spot. Okay, so the flower will look something like that. Okay, so white flower with red spot. So this is the trait, this is a trademark of codominance. Okay, let us take a look. What would be the result of self-pollinating the plants from F1 generation? Now, so if you're going to pollinate the plant from F1 generation, so all F1 generation have the heterozygous form. So therefore, you can see from here, the heterozygous form, they cross, and then all these are the various gametes possible from the two parents, and then the F1 genotype, okay, will be of these various combination. Okay, now so you can tell that, yeah, these are the combination possible. So you will have one white, you can have two white with red spot and one red. So therefore the ratio is one white is to two white with red spot and then one red. So these are the phenotypic ratio for F1 generation. Okay, now if there are 3,600 seeds, okay, obtained from the cross, okay, now how many of these seeds would you expect to give rise to plants with red flowers? Okay, now so as we already seen the red, there's 1/4 the chance of getting red. So 1/4 the chance of getting red, you multiply by the 3,600 seeds and you will get 900. So therefore the answer is the number of seeds that would give rise to red flowers are about 900. Okay. Now next, when a certain variety of black chicken is crossed with white chicken, all the resulting offspring are checkered. Okay, black and white. So that means mixture of black and white. Now, so explain this pattern of inheritance. Okay, now, so once you see such thing happen, they have a mixture of both parents' traits. So very likely it should cross your mind that these are codominants. Okay, now, so both alleles, okay, so you represent capital B to represent black and capital W to represent white. Okay, they are equally expressed in the heterozygous condition. So that means the heterozygous condition is the B and W, both are capital. And this actually means that this is a codominance, okay, genes. Now, let us look at this case. Is it possible for a couple with blood group A and B to have a child with blood group O? Okay, explain your answer with genetic diagram. So now, with the help of this genetic diagram given, we can see that the parent with blood group O with this genotype and blood group B with this genotype, and these are the respective gametes that are being generated from both parents. Now, so the F1 generation genotype and phenotype, now you can see that all the 4 blood groups are possible, okay, in the offspring. Okay, now so therefore, yes, so you can see blood group O here. So that means parents with blood group A and blood group B able to produce O blood group children. Now, next example 4, a woman whose blood group was O married a man with blood group A. So O with A. Explain how is it possible for the couple to have a child with blood group O. Okay, now so from here you know that the man must be heterozygous. Okay, so this man must be heterozygous in order to have O blood group child. Okay, so this because allele O is recessive to dominant IA. So in order to have blood group O child, each allele that comes from parent must be IO. Okay, so therefore this father need to be heterozygous IAIO. Now, let us examine this case. A woman whose blood group was O married a man of blood group A. What is the chance of their children having blood group A, assuming the father is heterozygous? Okay, now, so first of all, we draw out the genetic diagram. Okay, now, so as you can see from the genetic diagram that the blood group A, okay, now blood group A have this genotype, blood group B have this genotype. Sorry, it should be blood group O, okay, that have this genotype. Okay, the gametes are of these various types, and of course, the F1 generation genotype will be of this A and O. So it means basically the phenotype will be blood group A and blood group O. So which means the ratio of offspring is 1:1. Okay, now so yeah, so it is the chance of getting, yeah, that is the genetic diagram actually shows that the chance of the first child having blood group A will be 50%. Yeah. So if you can see that, yeah, it is 2 out of 4. So therefore it is, yeah, 50%. Now part C, what is the probability, okay, that their first two children, first two, okay, will have blood group A. Okay, now, so you make use of what you found out just now, the earlier question. So you know that the probability of getting a blood group A is half. Okay, now, so if you want a consecutive, okay, first two children, so you just have half times half and you will get 1/4, which is equivalent of 25%. So consecutive first two children are blood group A. Now another couple had two children, both blood group B. The father was of blood group B and mother blood group O. Okay, now the father concluded that he must be homozygous, IBIB, because if he were heterozygous, half of his children would be of blood group O. Do you think his conclusion is justifiable? Okay, now so the answer is that no, this is not justifiable because only two children. So the couple had only two children. So the genetic ratios are unreliable with small numbers. Okay, this is what in statistic term means small sample size. If it is too small, it is not a good representative. Okay, so the two children with blood group O B doesn't means that okay the father obviously need to be homozygous IB and IB, okay, because some of the children could be blood group O, but you may need more, okay, to show that. All right, now let us take a look at the self-check questions, okay, in page 9 to page 12. Okay, now, so if you look at this question, what is the probability that a surviving moth of F1 generation is heterozygous? Okay, now, so you should be able to very quickly uh, get the answers B, which is 50%. Okay, now, so by using the genetic Punnett square, actually you can use a Punnett square for this to work out on your own. Okay, now because the question asks for heterozygous, so heterozygous should be in this form. So therefore, heterozygous, okay, so made with heterozygous, so you're going to get, yeah, 50%, okay, of it will be in, yeah, heterozygous form in F1 generation. Okay, now let us look at question 2. The table below shows this. So after reading this question, okay, now if the yellow bead represent a dominant alleles, okay, yellow bead dominant, the black bead represent recessive. How many individual would display dominant phenotype and are heterozygous? So you look at this, they have two conditions, heterozygous as well as dominant. So in order to have this trait, that means you have to get 208, the mixed pair. So therefore, the reasoning is you use a mixed pair, divide by 400, so you should get around 0.52. Okay, so which is about 52%. So therefore, the closest answer is of course 0.50. Okay, question 3a. A purebred plant with round seed is crossed with a purebred plant with wrinkled seed. However, all the offspring produced have oval-shaped seeds. Okay, now so what is happening here? Okay, the oval shape, it is not round but oval in shape. So this actually gives you an idea that it could be some sort of codominance, okay, that is happening here. Now, an organism with either homozygous dominant or homozygous recessive for a particular trait. next, use genetic diagram to illustrate, okay, the cross between these two species of plant based on Mendel's first law. Okay, Mendel's first law is the law of segregation. So you know that the segregation is referring to the formation of the gametes. Okay, now so during the formation of gametes, yeah, so they separate. Okay, so the alleles will be separated. Now, so you let R, okay, be the alleles for round seed and small r be the alleles for wrinkled seed. And then these are the parental phenotype. You have the round and the wrinkled type. Parental genotype will be of this, both capital R or both small r. And the gametes will be the respective gametes. And then after fertilization, the F1 generation, the genotype will be of, all will be the same type, one capital R and one small r. So therefore, the F1 generation phenotype will be all oval shape. Okay, now so this genetic diagram, okay, show you, okay, what is happening. Now next, explain why the seeds are neither round nor wrinkled. Okay, they are neither round nor wrinkled is because the seed alleles are codominant. Okay, so they are codominant, and so the phenotype of the seeds show the intermediate between that found in its parents. Okay, good. Now, please finish up the other last two questions. Okay, 4 and 5. Okay, we will discuss in our next lesson. Okay, now so do finish up. Okay, now let me spend some time on the class activities. Okay, now so we mentioned about the Office 365 forms. Okay, to do a survey of 10 external human traits. Okay, now so each person in the class should ask 10 other non-classmates, okay, to do the survey. Okay, now so you need to come up with the survey question as soon as possible, as what I mentioned, okay, earlier. Okay, now so first of all, importantly, now you need to it would be good that if you could if you can include diagram. For example, sometimes you put down the trait widow's peak. People may not know what is a widow's peak, so at least you put in pictures to highlight that. Okay, yeah, these are the widow's peak. Okay, or maybe detached and undetached ear loops. So it will be good to actually show picture. So at least the survey, okay, when you send it out, your survey, the respondents will know that exactly what you're asking. All right, yeah, so the important point is not don't only write down the trait but also show pictures. Okay, so that's why within the Okay, now so have some forms of a division of label within the class. Okay, register number 1 to 10, you can come up with the traits. Okay, so one person just come up one. Okay, ensure no duplication. Okay, now so no two person have the same traits. Okay, so otherwise you can do waste one choice. Okay, register number 11 to 20, you can search for photos or pictures. Okay, please acknowledge, okay, the source of these photos or pictures, okay, when you include it in the survey. And then last of all, register number 21 to 25 or 24, you can vet through the entire survey and see whether it is good enough, and then no spelling mistakes or any mistakes, okay, before you send it out. Okay, now so you can actually, after you have finished everything, you can copy the URL. You can use exactly the same URL that I sent for your class. Okay, now once you make any changes in the form, it doesn't matter because it will be auto save and then auto updated. Okay, so it is safe that you can send that URL to your friends who will be responding, okay, to the survey. Okay, now so I hope you enjoy this activity and have fun. Okay, hope you like this lesson. Okay, see you in next home-based learning. Bye bye.